that?
Yeah, we did have on here some time to discuss, and I guess have Ian share a little bit about a proposal he put out around putting together a funding and finance committee. We also have, I think, some exciting updates around some resources that are coming our way. And so I guess Ian and Kara, if you want to, I know Kara has to leave at 2. So I wonder, Kara, if you want to provide a little bit of information about some of those resources, and then we can give Ian a few minutes.
Sure, and I apologize. I have this conflict that's from 2 to 2:30, so I will have to leave and come back as I did last month. But a couple of things I wanted to just share by way of background for the resources that the Oregon Health Authority has related to implementing Healthier Together Oregon. The first is our Preventive Health and Health Services Block Grant, which is OHA Public Health's only non-categorical federal funding stream that we have that comes into our state. And those resources help to support our coordination with local public health and tribal public health, as well as implementing Healthier Together Oregon. And so we are in the process right now, actually, of developing our budget for the next federal fiscal year, which starts October 1. And in the past, we've used these resources to provide mini grants to community-based organizations when we were developing Healthier Together Oregon, to help pay for communications. It helps to support some of our staffing. And so we'll want to get some input from you on how to invest the, roughly $100,000 that we have in that funding stream to help to support the priorities that you all determine moving forward. I know that's not a ton of resource, but it's something to get us started. And then due to some other federal dollars that have come in to help support the COVID-19 response, we are fortunate in that we'll have some resources that we can kind of move around to help our existing 170 community-based organizations that OHA has been working with for the last year on culturally and linguistically responsive contact tracing, wraparound supports for people facing isolation or quarantine, as well as community engagement, both from COVID-19 prevention all the way through vaccine work. And with that, essentially we can make some shifts so that we can invest another $14 million in those 170 community-based organizations to broaden their approach to start to look at COVID-19 recovery, and hopefully line that up to some degree with Healthier Together Oregon as well. I think when we discovered we could do this, due to some other shifts in our funding on Friday, the question was, well, really, what do you mean? What does this mean in terms of what a community-based organization would do with this resource in this way? What does recovery mean? And then how do you kind of turn that into a scope of work? And so we'd like to get some thoughts on that, I think, is possible today. And then one of our next steps will be to have the same conversation with our community-based organization advisory committee that's helping to guide some of the investments that we're making as well. And Ian, if you want to go ahead and speak as well, then we can kind of have an open dialogue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Woodbrook. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the chair of the Whitaker Community Council. We're in Eugene, Oregon. During our last meeting, I was a part of Group 3, and we talked about budget and finance. Some of the other members of our breakout group were Sarah, or I'll just say this right now, apologies if I mispronounce your name or organization, Sarah Baldralt with Oregon Health Authority, Jenny Poole-Radway with Consejo Hispano, Rachel Schultz with the Boys and Girls Club of Portland, Lauren Godfredson with United Way of Columbia Willamette, and myself. And we discussed some of the things that Kara was talking about, how we have access to approximately $100,000 each fiscal year, and that's a federal fiscal year. So it ends September 30th and begins October 1st. And we have $40,000 to allocate and spend by September 30th of this year because the funding doesn't roll over. And so we discussed 3 primary objectives for a potential new committee, and talked about some next steps that we included in the proposal. So based on the charter, I thought that I would throw out some of the things that our group was talking about in a new committee to really bring ideas to the group on how to be able to both spend the funding that we're allocated, but also talk about alignment across the state and for local public health agencies and between community-based organizations for funding opportunities like the Preventive Services Block Grant with HTO.
Thanks, Kara. Thanks, Ian. Do folks have any questions about would it be a new committee, Ian, that you mentioned that kind of focuses on that $40,000 that needs to be used? Is that my understanding?
It would be a new committee, and apologies, I don't have the proposal in front of me right now, but it would be to both deliberate and bring proposals to the group for how to be able to spend not just the 40,000 that we have remaining of the approximately 100,000 this fiscal year, but also in the future.
Okay.
Bring proposals to the group, and then also talk about how to best create alignment between local public health agencies and the state for additional funding opportunities from the state with Healthier Together Oregon.
Thank you. Do folks feel like you want to, I don't know that you necessarily need to vote on whether you want a new committee, or do folks want to, is that an area of interest based on what was shared by both Kara and Ian? Do folks feel like they want to kind of dive in to the money pool and figure out what that all entails for this group?
No, just to clarify, are you asking if we want to discuss where the funds should be allocated now, or are you asking if we should create a committee to discuss and allocate the funds and then bring the information back to this committee?
Yes, the latter. Thank you, Rachel. So it really would be a committee to kind of start thinking about and bring back, as Ian was saying, bring back proposals to the larger group. There's a comment from Jenny. I'd like to dive into the money pool either now or in the future. Thank you, Jenny. I always like it when people just dive in. So it looks like we have, and I know that you were a part of that first committee talking about some of the fiscal pieces, and so you'd like to continue some of that conversation, is what I'm hearing. Jenny, would you also, I don't want to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you also like to kind of head that up? I think it's important to, when we dive in, we also say, this is how much I can jump in and work with folks. I have another person who would like to dive in, Rachel. Oh, you just like the money pool. Okay, we can work with that too. I think we all like the money pool. It sounds like Jenny, if you, no bandwidth, thank you, but participation, fantastic. Thank you for identifying that. Okay, so we have you willing to work on that. But yeah, the question really is about who's available to kind of be a part of that conversation. And it's important to recognize as much as these, the time that we have once a month is really valuable. It's hard to kind of have all those discussions together as a group. And so this is where we kind of need to think about how do we want to utilize Basecamp to have these smaller group discussions and continue that work, right? So it's all that homework, if you will, that happens in between bringing this group together once a month. So I would also encourage folks that if you, as you're thinking about it, and want to kind of dive into some of the more fiscal related work, and feel like that's an area that you can contribute to helping formulate for this group and bring proposals and have ideas, that you would reach out to Christy to say, yeah, now that I think about it, yeah, put me into that part of that committee, and I'd like to kind of just start with that. And so I have Jenny down there.
Yeah, and maybe what would be helpful, New, is we can provide maybe a little bit more context about what exactly this would be, how much time it would be, kind of
Sure.
put together a little bit of a work plan, because I'm not totally clear yet on kind of the timing. I think there's a couple of phases to this work. The first one being kind of figuring out what to do about the current block grant funding, and also figuring out what to do about the next year that would start October 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then this 14 million that Kara just mentioned would be kind of a second phase of that work. So if people are kind of weighing what they have time and capacity for, I'm happy to provide a little bit more description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then I see your comment, Stan, about just continuing to have open and transparent discussions for all of this. Absolutely. I hear you're saying my concerns with agencies are only if they were to have voting rights, or very much need agency inclusion for effective accomplishment through the tasks. It would be good to include agency leadership in subcommittees, and then to speak to our committee, we need further, excuse me. Yeah, we need more open time. Which kind of brings us to this point where what we need to do is kind of regroup a little bit and look at the rest of the agenda. I think this might be a good time to take our break real quick, because we take a 5-minute break and then come back, and then that'll give us time to kind of think about how we want to utilize the rest of the hour that we have together. Does that work for folks? Thank you, Laura. I see your message there. So let's take a quick 5-minute break and resume in 5 minutes. So right now it's 2:03. So if we come back at 2:08. Thanks, everybody. Or then how we've done it before. And I think it should be automatic, yeah. All right, welcome back, everybody. Fast and Furious breakout rooms, awesome. We see some smiles, so that's good. Everybody got a chance to connect a little bit. So why don't we do this? I'm having Liz kind of record some of the topics that come up as you kind of share back out with the larger group. If I could have a couple of folks share some of the top priorities that bubbled up for your breakout group, that would be great. And it could just be 1 or 2 things that kind of resonated with the whole group. So I'll do this. How about, I'm gonna just call on some folks, and if you don't mind going ahead and sharing what your particular breakout room shared, that would be great. How about Kimberly? Would you mind sharing what your group shared?
Hi there. So actually we had a snafu.
Oh,
yeah, someone came into my office just as, excuse me, I'm trying to talk with my new Invisalign and I'm failing. It's really cute. Somebody came into my office just as you sent us to a breakout room. And, you know, my peer and I were like, oh, let's get back on task. So let's try to get out of the breakout room, look at the last slide and come back in and kind of recenter ourselves. And then the breakout room ended. So
okay.
be really transparent about the
no
very
problem.
large Monday that's happening over here. So
thank you. Okay, so how about we go to Susan, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what your group had discussed.
I'm happy to share it, but I'm really going to be trying to channel Connie because she presented the question and then we kind of discussed the implications of the question. And that is, how are we going to ensure that rural communities that so often don't have the resources to get in line for funding and, you know, submit for applications and things like that. How do we ensure those rural communities get prioritized and get the resources they need resulting from our projects?
Okay, great. So that's a great one that we'll put on our list as well. Thank you. How about Esther?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So we talked about, I'm going to pull up the implementation plan. So we talked about under equity and justice priority, the institutional bias. Specifically, it's on page 3 in behavioral health, building upon and creating BIPOC, AIAN-led community solutions for education, criminal justice, housing, social services, public health, and healthcare to address systemic bias and inequities. Something that stood out to me is that one of the considerations and activities listed is to recruit representatives from education and law enforcement to CCOs, which is coordinated care orgs, community advisory councils, and then to conduct local assessments. So I thought that was an interesting strategy, only because one, it's specifically talking about a council housed in a CCO, which in my experience working with the nonprofit that I work with, you know, the work we do that is housed within state and counties tend to still be pretty disconnected from the needs of individuals and communities. And so, and it was also interesting to me that it explicitly named recruiting reps from education and law enforcement, only because I think the community relationship to law enforcement really varies, I think, based on geography, based on a number of different experiences, identities, things like that. And so it just sort of stood out to me. Yeah, and the amount of time for the breakout was really short, so we only sort of just touched the surface of that.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely include more time for breakout sessions. I don't know if I had shared with you folks that I'm an instructor at PSU. And so I found that when we do breakout sessions, I have to give folks less time because they don't ever want to talk. I don't feel like that's the case with this group. And so now I need to make a mental note that we need to allow this group to have more time in those breakouts, because I do think that they're very valuable. And thank you for that feedback, Esther. I appreciate that.
And Nu, I can also provide just a little bit of context on that particular strategy, because I think that's one that comes up just because it has all of that inclusion of one, you know, all of those different kind of facets into one. So just so you all know, within the subcommittees, that started out as a strategy specifically looking at the disparities within the Black community. So it was looking at, especially around law enforcement, the racism in law enforcement, and the racism in education, especially disciplinary action. So, but it also came out through the discussion that really, you know, these are very similar issues that come up in American Indian Alaska Native communities and within the Latina community. So it was decided to broaden that and then also include all of those different sectors. So just so you know, that's kind of the origin of that strategy. And yeah, and specifically there was kind of that need to affect these disparities in law enforcement and how to include them in different ways that sort of came out of that particular, what that strategy evolved into. So just so you kind of have a little bit of background that's how that evolved.
That's great, Liz. Thank you. Amy, were you in a different group than any of those that spoke?
It sure was.
Fantastic.
We talked about, what did we talk about now that we just heard from everyone? One of the things that I guess I brought up was just some clarity around the strategies. If we have 8 implementation areas, then are we trying to pick a couple from each, or are we trying to focus on just a few of the implementation areas? And then Rachel talked about the key indicators, but I can't remember what you talked about. So Rachel, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I also want to own for my group that I led them completely astray in that we did not pick any indicators that we wanted to focus on. What I said was, I heard them say that we need to talk about what information we need in order to feel like we're ready to go through the indicators. So
That works.
apologies. What we said was, the thing about the indicators that we sort of talked about was that it wasn't clear if each one of the 62 was supposed to have a measurement, or the key indicators were supposed to bucket all of the key indicators. And if we're supposed to measure them, I guess my request would be like, where did these come from? Like, what's the baseline in at all? And then how did we get these 62 in the first place? Like, where did they come from, and what was the impetus for getting them, since we need to implement them?
Okay. Thank you. And I think we had at least one more group. Kimberly with CT Siletz. Do you want to share about what you discussed in your breakout group? Or anyone from that particular group? Okay, if not, then is there any other group that wanted to go ahead and share specifically, or any of the committee members that wanted to kind of raise up information about what they would like more information on?
One of the members of my group was wondering what the expectations would be for DCBS, the Department of Consumer Business Services.
Thank you, Lisa. So as we wrap up this particular portion, what this will do is really help us to kind of figure out the gaps in what type of information that we can provide for this group, as you really kind of, you know, again, let some of that information sit with you, figure out, okay, I don't understand or need more information about this before I can determine how I'm going to go about prioritizing. Okay, and so would it be safe to say, Christy, that we can provide some of that information on Basecamp?
Yeah. So I think Liz and I have been tracking the questions that you've been raising, and we can do a couple things. We can certainly provide some responses in Basecamp and in other ways, some other resources, etc. The other thing that we were thinking about that might be helpful here over the next month or two is to provide you all with kind of open office hours, where you could come and tune in if you wanted to, and have space to hear a little bit more of the context and history behind the development of the plan, behind the development of the strategies and the measures. So especially I think as we move you all to start really digging into these difficult questions around prioritizing the strategies, you're probably gonna start to have a lot more questions. And so we'd be happy to provide a space for you to tune in and chat about those things, if that's helpful.
I had a question.
Please.
My group had some questions about the use of Basecamp, and I'm happy to let them speak, but the questions were like, what's the expectation around, because Basecamp moves really fast and you get a lot of notifications from Basecamp that can be hard to keep up with. So what are the expectations around the amount that we should be accessing Basecamp and the kinds of work that we should be doing in Basecamp? Just, I guess, parameters around its use and that sort of thing.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think the first thing is like Basecamp is one tool that we can use. It works for some people, but not for everybody. So happy to kind of see how that works for you all. I think we kind of got you a group started because we had a license and it worked in the past, and let's just kind of give it a whirl and see how it goes. But that being said, if it's not working for you and you hate it, we don't have to use it. There are ways to limit the notification. So if that's too much for you, we can certainly help you kind of, help you set up the notifications you want to receive. You don't have to receive it every single time somebody posts something. And yeah, I mean, it's meant to be a tool for you to use. So please reach out if you have questions about it, or, we could do a demo during a meeting or even during those office hours if you want to want some more information about it.
Yeah, I think just speaking for myself, a demo on how to use it would be great. I know a lot of people use it, and I haven't dived into how to use it and just get, the flurry of emails that I don't do a lot with. So just
it can get
making it useful would be great.
Yeah, it can get pretty overwhelming pretty quickly. So yes, I think the intention of putting out some office hours for you all is to kind of answer all of those questions and needs that you might have. So
Okay.
If none of the times work for you, we're happy to meet offline. And
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Very kind.
There was one suggestion we had around that, Christy, and it's probably too much work, but we have some task force that we manage in our organization, and we'll just put out a Friday summary of the things that we really want you to look at, and then just additional things if you feel like looking at them. And it's just a really helpful, I know on Friday I can go read that and then know what to look for.
Okay. And that comes out by email?
Excuse me?
That comes out by email?
Yeah, we have somebody just do the base camp roundup, and it just kind of please look at this, and these are the events we want you to see. And then, hey, information from partners if you want to go through it. Just because we send out way too much in base camp as an organization. And so we just try to give a little summary. I don't know.
Great suggestion. Thanks, Amy.
And this is Heather. Also in the notification settings, if you guys do have a chance to log in, it's in the upper right hand corner. You can set it up yourself so you just get a daily summary or weekly summary of what's going on, so you don't get as many pings throughout the day. And if you need help setting that up, just email me.
And folks have your email, Heather? Do the folks on the committee have emails for all of the OHA staff?
Yes, they should be included in the
Perfect.
Invitations that go out, as well as all communications.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and just to give a 30-second demo. So I think you all see Basecamp. I'm in there right now because I started making some notes about the questions. If you go into your little icon up here in the right-hand corner, sorry if it's really small, and you click on that, you'll have a hyperlink here that says change your notification settings. And that will let you go in here and adjust kind of all the things that you want. You could also go in here and turn all notifications off if you want to do that. So.
Fantastic. Thank you for that quick demo. And yes, please reach out to OHA staff and myself if you need any type of further assistance and kind of just want to ground yourself in the work. It really does help just to have a quick conversation because, we want to make this a successful time for you. And so just doing the groundwork early on, I think really does help set the foundation for everyone. So with that, let's go ahead and move into our final piece of the afternoon. And in the last 30 minutes that we have, what I'd like to do is spend at least 20 minutes going over the process and the criteria for prioritizing. I'm going to turn that over to Christy to share about that. And I want to give ourselves at least kind of 10 minutes to kind of wrap up what we achieved today and then move forward into looking at setting the agenda for next time. If we don't get to that, we might need to do some of that work over Basecamp. So I just want to throw that out there because we need to look at that as well. All right, Christy.
Thanks, Neil. So I think, you know, we've mentioned that one of your first tasks here is prioritizing the strategies in this plan with the acknowledgement that we can't do everything at once. So would like you all to identify the strategies that you feel are most important in terms of getting this work started. So we have a proposal for you all on how we could do that, given kind of the constraints and barriers of not being able to come together at the moment, or, you know, and trying to get some of these things moving. And that is to use a Delphi analysis tool. So I would love it if some of you have experience using this, but we'll walk through it briefly. So basically it's a series of online surveys. I think the other nice thing about this is that it does put a lot of the work into a survey tool, which isn't perfect, but I think it kind of gets you all to be able to use your meeting time pretty effectively. So we built a draft survey, and I'll pull that up here in a second. But basically, we have a survey that's ready to go, and it asks you to identify strategies that are most important and least important. And it does that within each of the 8 implementation areas. One question for you, of course, is, well, what does important mean, right? And how are you defining the word important? So we'll want to probably have some conversation about that. But we would put that survey out to you. We would also put this out to community. There was a lot of support from all of you about getting some community feedback about this prioritization process, without also wanting to be redundant or kind of ignore some of the community engagement work that we did in developing the plan. And so there is some information about the previous engagement processes we used in Basecamp in terms of how we did that and the questions we asked, but definitely heard that it's important to hear back from community now. And so we would do that. We would share the survey with community. We would put it out in multiple languages, and we would offer an incentive for those who participate in the survey, not to everybody, but like a lottery-based incentive. One kind of limitation of OHA putting out these surveys is that when we put these out, we traditionally hear from a lot of white educated women, which I think is not who we want to hear from, right? And so I think with this particular survey, the other thing that we would propose is being a little bit more targeted to the communities that we want to hear from most. And we are in a much better position to do that now with the 170 plus community-based organizations that we're working with as part of COVID response, as the partners that we've engaged for COVID recovery response, and through all of you as well. So I think we'd be a little bit more specific about who we are asking to complete the survey. But that is one way that we are proposing to kind of quickly hear from community about what strategies they feel are most important. So we would take the survey, you all would take the survey, community would take the survey. And if, you know, this is all assuming that you say, yes, this is the way to do it. So we would ask you to respond to that survey before your next meeting. We would bring you initial results that both you had provided, as well as responses from community, and you would have a chance to look at those responses and discuss it, right? That would not be the final recommendation. That would just be a way to you know, provide some space and information about where people are landing. Following your July meeting, you would then take the same survey. We could modify the survey, but traditionally it's used the same survey. You would take the survey again, and this time you would have more information, right? You would have more information from what other partnership members had to say, how other community members are thinking about it. And we would kind of continue this cycle until you had landed on your prioritized list of strategies. Let me pull up the survey, because I think sometimes that helps a little bit to see what exactly this would look like. And given that, you know, this would go to community, we tried to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. Can you all see the Survey Monkey? You looking
Yes.
at, okay. So, so here we would provide a little bit more information about the survey. I didn't do that yet, but basically there's kind of 2 sets of questions. The first question would be to rank the implementation areas in order of importance. So of these 8 implementation areas, what is the most important overall, right? And you might say, okay, that's housing and food, and then it's behavioral health and whatever. So you'd end up with a list of 1 through 8, big picture, what's the most important thing here? And then the survey takes you to each of the 8 implementation areas one by one. And there's 2 questions. It gives you all the strategies here. And it says, select the strategy that is most important. So you only get 1, right? You only get 1, what's most important? And then the same strategies, what is least important? And then you would do that for each of the implementation areas. So this would be for workforce development, what's most important, what's least important, and so forth. The other thing that we would do that isn't part of this survey is that, especially for the community feedback, to make sure that we're hearing from the people that you all want to hear from, is to add the real D collection. So we'd be asking respondents to identify their race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, language, those kinds of things. So we could kind of piece out specific communities and the responses they provided.
Do folks have some real quick questions about that for Christy?
Hi, this is Connie. I was just wondering, where are you going to get the list of these community-based organizations?
Yeah, great idea. Great question. So we have, through COVID recovery, and I will pull up the link here and pop it in the chat so you can see, we are providing support for 170 community-based organizations across the state that provide culturally and linguistically responsive services. So many folks on the partnership are involved in that work. Thank you, Liz. Put a chat or a link in the chat. So if you click on that link, you will see, and you can filter by population served, by where in the state they're located, by languages that they all speak. You can kind of get a sense of the organizations that we have a direct contact through that network. There's also a similar, I think similar, but also a little bit different group of CBOs through the COVID response and recovery unit as well. And then this would be in addition to any groups that you wanted to share this survey with, your professional or personal networks. Yes, Alicia, definitely. Or even better, once we share the survey with you, you can just send it out.
To your question, Connie, the OHA has really done an incredible job in the last year of really trying to better connect with community across the state. And so of those 170 or plus CBOs, they're really trying to, they have, OHA has the community engagement team that has regional folks who dive in and know and understand who are all the players in that region. And so they're the connection and sharing that information. So it's pretty robust, more robust than I've seen it in the 18 years that I've worked with the organization.
And just so you'll note too, this is Liz OHA staff, just a quick note too, that it's going to be updated within the next couple of weeks. So there are some additional ones that they've brought on when they've identified gaps in specific regions, especially since, you know, there's some specifically COVID affected communities. So there will be an updated list forthcoming in the next couple of weeks too.
Fantastic. So in the few minutes that we have, again, we don't necessarily want to rush this process with you folks, but we would like to land on whether folks feel like this Delphi process of sending surveys, kind of going through that quick demo that Christy had showed us, that prioritizing 1 through 8, you know, as a priority process which ones you think where they land, and then going into the deeper part of strategies. Do folks feel comfortable with this particular way to start working on prioritizing? You would take the survey, would gather up that information, send it back out to the folks, and then have time to discuss, and then you do the survey again. So it's kind of multi steps, and then incorporating the opportunity for hearing from community folks that you would, and their prioritization of it all. What do you folks think? Timur?
Yes, hello again. So couple of questions about the surveys. Is it gonna be in other languages as well? Will you guys be translating that?
Yeah, definitely. So in the past, we've only done surveys in English and Spanish. With this particular survey, we'd love to do additional languages. So, you know, we could do all 12 of the safe and strong languages. That might take a little bit longer to get ready and out the door. So maybe, you know, we choose 6 or 7 languages. Again, I think we would look to all of you to recommend the languages that we would put the survey out in, and kind of, you know, what's reasonable and feasible.
Okay, and what about the time frame? Usually like these surveys, they might take up a lot of time to gather feedback. Do we have like a specific time frame we want to run this survey and just say this is the cutoff date?
Yeah, I mean, we could keep this survey open for as long as you all are using the information. So we could keep it open for a couple of weeks. The proposal that you all looked at has you all making final decisions at your August meeting, which means we could leave the survey open all the way through, you know, end of July. So we could keep the survey open for community for as long as needed.
And one last question before I see somebody else has their hand up. So what we've learned from working with the community is that it's very hard for people. It's very hard to get people to go online and fill out the surveys, especially like, you know, if we're looking at East Portland, there's still that digital divide. So what we've done in the past with the surveys is that we had to call people up and talk to them and, like, you know, sit there with them while they fill out that survey to actually have them answer those questions. I don't know if anybody else had that issue as well, and how were they able to get those surveys filled out, because I think one of you guys mentioned that majority of time you guys getting feedback from highly educated white women, and not everybody else. Has anybody run into that issue?
I would agree, and also just the time that it takes to do surveys, and if it's easily and quickly readable. I mean, even if we think about, you know, all barriers aside, think of a parent trying to take a very long survey, and when they're able to do that. And so I would just, that would be a barrier that I would think of, is the readability. How quickly can it be gotten through, which is hard when it needs to be a really intensive survey. And I'm curious, it sounds like a process of elimination type of process. And so is the data skewed if the same respondents are not taking the survey over and over to continue eliminating? Or can it be taken by a bunch of different people a bunch of different times?
Is that something that we know, Christy? And I want to acknowledge that, Esther, I'm going to give you the floor next, and then Connie.
If I'm understanding your question, Rachel, SurveyMonkey allows you to track like the IP address, which prevents the same person from taking the survey more than once.
I must have misunderstood. What I understood it to be is like, we did the survey and then we refine it, and then the same people do the survey again, we refine it, same people do the survey again, refine it. But
I'm sorry. I meant
no, that's okay.
I was thinking the partnership. the partnership, the 20 of you would take the survey repeatedly. And then, but the community would also be taking the survey, and you'd be able to look at kind of, well, here's how the partnership is thinking about it, and here's how community is thinking about it.
Okay.
But we
Thank you.
wouldn't ask community to take the survey. I mean, it would be out there, and people could take it as many times as they wanted, I suppose.
Esther, you want to go ahead with your question or comment?
Yeah, really quickly. So as we're thinking about, we have this robust number of priorities. And so let's say this group focuses on like 5 priorities for, the focus of this iteration of the partnership. What happens? I mean, so I guess one part of this I am feeling a little unclear about is what is the, so let's say we focus on like 5 priorities, then is the goal to just like figure out how to implement those in like XYZ ways? Is that like the goal of this specific cohort? Because I guess my concern is, or something that's coming up for me is, one, I think there's a lot of overlap in the different priorities, the implementation priorities, and 2, I want to be really clear that like, is there going to be a place for us to be able to go back if like, let's say we choose 5 priorities, there's like, I want to make sure that nothing sort of gets left behind, and maybe that's not realistic, but I think it is possible, and I think we should maybe like think, I feel like I just haven't had that conversation, so I would like to be super clear about, if X number of priorities gets, our focus, then what happens with the rest? Or will there be ways for us to like plug back into those other ones? Just because there's a lot of different recommendations on that list.
Thank you, Esther. I'm going to have Connie, you go ahead and give your comment as well, and then we'll try to pull everything together.
Okay, I was kind of agreeing with Tamir that in our community, a lot of people don't have access to computers, and with the libraries being closed, they don't have access. And how will we capture all that information? Are we going to go door to door, or is there going to be a place where they can go and take this survey, or what's the plan? And that's what we speak to about rural communities, how they get left out. It's because they have these challenges. Also, the challenges in my community are that a lot of the adults don't have more than a 6th grade education.
I wonder if it's possible, if we as the partnership might comb through that big bulky list, and then sort of, because we have 5 years to do this, and sort of the way I'm thinking about it is like, pick some for the first year that maybe are going to take the longest, and then move out the other ones, or that are gonna, however we figure out doing it. And then, so we sort of put together our ones that we think that we can achieve now-ish, and that they might take a little bit of time, or like whatever. And then we put out to the community and ask like, which one should we start on first? Like, these are the ones that we want to tackle, which are most important to you, what do you want to see movement on? And then we present them with more of a pared down list. And then it's a lot smaller for our folks to take a look at. It's a lot, it could go faster for them. We could make the language a lot more simple. And then for our community representatives that need to sit down with these people, they also would have this framework of like, I helped create this. I can give the why of why we picked these things. Maybe that's a successful way to do this.
Thank you, Rachel, for that. I think folks are processing. I know a couple of folks in the chat have feel comfortable with that. I do know that we don't have much time more to process today. What I would suggest is that my recommendation would be, do folks feel like, you may need some more time to process some of this. I know that the hope was by the end of this meeting today that folks would agree that this might be one possible method of moving forward on prioritization. Christy, do we have some time to give folks at another, like the July meeting, to decipher whether, you know, a more refined approach using Delphi, along with some of the suggestions, giving time for people to process a little more? Where's that landing?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the feedback. And especially around the limitations of using an online survey to get community feedback like this. And that is exactly why we did 2 rounds of mini grants, which we said, hey, CBO, you know your community, you know they're not going to complete this online survey. You go figure out the best way to get this information from folks that we need to hear from. So yeah, so I really love this kind of like phased approach of maybe trying to whittle away the list a little bit and then take it out to community. I'm wondering.
There was a comment of possibly this group doing the Delphi process without community first. And then it kind of gives everybody, okay, let's do it to see if we even like it, right? It's hard to know. And it's hard to kind of land on which other option we might have. But do folks feel like that's a good way to move forward? I see potentially yes from Stan, good idea. So kind of based on.
Yeah, and I would encourage partnership members too to take a look at those reports and see if there's anything else that you need within those community, you know, those rounds of community engagement. Because Rachel, kind of what you mentioned is exactly what we did the last time, because we did not make them vet all of the strategies, but we gave the set of 63 strategies to each of the community-based organizations that we gave mini grants to, and then we allowed them to narrow it down and then them to gather feedback from their communities. And of course, you know, this was all supposed to happen in March of 2020. April 2020 was the community engagement period. So as you can imagine, most of it actually had to end up being over the phone because they were going to do community or, you know, meetings. So, but you can take a look at those too for context, like, so that you just don't feel like you're making this decision for yourself, but there's some really robust information. If there's any other sort of analyses, you know, that we can help you out with to pull information from those, please do let us know too, because we did sort of have that exact sort of what you had mentioned process happened in the last time when we were, you know, making sure that when we were vetting the plan as we were getting closer to finalizing it.
I'm curious, this is just a thought off the top of my head, and I'm very sorry I'm taking up so much time, but you know, we also need to figure out how to spend the $40,000 that we have, and we really want robust community involvement, and we know that there's a lot of barriers. I wonder if that $40,000 could go towards community-based organizations to support their work getting their communities involved, such as, like, I hear Connie saying and Tamir saying that they really need to bring people in and sit them down and or go door to door, and that takes time and money and effort. And I wonder if they could use the $40,000 to ensure that their community's voice is heard in this process. Just an idea.
I think those are great ideas. I know that folks are letting it marinate and everything. So with the last few minutes, I would like to move this group to one. It sounds as if we will go ahead and share this survey to the partnership for your first kind of look at prioritization, right? Knowing that we will figure out the community piece as potentially after we can narrow it down a little more for our communities to take the next crack of it. And OHA staff will look at kind of revising that schedule a little bit, Christy and Liz, to see what might work as the next step when to bring community in. The last piece that you had mentioned, Rachel, about potentially using that $40,000 to help communities kind of figure out how to engage folks a little more. I would like to put that on into the finance group as a potential to do or a discussion there. I would encourage folks to continue to discuss things over Basecamp as you're letting things process a little bit. I would also encourage folks to look at Basecamp, because we will put out additional opportunities to gain more information before you take the surveys, right? So we'll put out those opportunities for office hours very soon, and additional one-on-one conversations if needed, if that's the best process for you folks. So those are the wrap-up pieces to this.
Thank you, New.
Does that feel comfortable, or at least agreeable? So, and I say that jokingly, but not. So I want folks to feel comfortable. That's really part of my passion in doing this type of work, because it's sometimes even in the uncomfort, it's okay. So with that, thank you for a very productive meeting. We will continue to communicate things in the next few weeks before the survey gets sent out to you. Maybe even send out more information on what we'd like, a recap of this meeting minutes for folks who need that. And if you have any questions or kind of not sure about something, please reach out to Christy, Liz, myself. I know Kara is still on the call as well. Anything else you need, please be sure, please utilize me in any way that you need as a facilitator to get an agenda item on or processing. Otherwise, thank you so much for a very productive meeting today, and we'll see you before July on Basecamp. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, New.
Yeah. Whew.
Do you want to set up time to debrief?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, but
yeah. Let me look at my schedule. Yeah, I have no more time today, and it might take us a day to kind of think through some of the things that we heard.
Yeah. I can send you an email.
Yeah, how about I have some time tomorrow afternoon after 3 o'clock and beyond, and then the next time I have would be Wednesday, 3 o'clock and beyond.
Yeah.
If that works. Just send me something and I'll tell you whether I can make it or not. Thank you, Mark, for all your work.
Hey, Mark, I had a question. Was Callie able to, did that work okay? I think you'll have to switch to the English channel, Mark.
Hi, hello, check,
Hi.
check. Yeah, honestly, I don't know when we lost her. And hello?
Yeah, I'm with
Hello?
you.
Hello?
I'm with you.
Oh, honestly, I'm not sure where we lost her, Christy. I interpreted for the first whole chunk before the break and then the breakout. And then I noticed that she was trying to connect with her audio and then apparently never could. And and she's still on the list here. So it's almost like her, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I sent her, several text messages and chat messages. I called her.
Okay.
And so.
And she didn't pick up?
No, she never picked up, never replied to anything I sent, at least. So anyways, just a little report back on what that was about. That way you know how to reach out to her whenever, or if Heather chooses to do that. I think she said she was going to try to connect with her one-on-one at some point.
Yeah, Heather usually tries to follow up just to kind of get this feedback in here.
Sure.
What went for her, so. Well, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
so honestly,
I appreciate your help trying to find her voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, honestly, I don't know when or if she heard anything. I assumed the whole first chunk that I interpreted that she was with us, but for all I know, based on what we're seeing now of how she connected, she may have never really been listening at all. I don't know. And so we'll only know and find out when and if Heather reaches out to her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll connect with her.
But then again, it doesn't seem like anything that we could have really done anything about. You know, we did
Yeah.
everything we could, it seems like.
Yeah.
All right, Christy, I'm
Okay.
signing off.